Hi folks, it is I, FloridaMan, the one and only, once more. Today, I hope you will enjoy my commentary on the game Continental Strife, which I finished on Play Diplomacy in July of 2020. This was an interesting one, and it finished with a twist. In this game, I took over the Russian position after the original player surrendered, so I will explain what happened before I joined, and then I'll get into how I handled my tenure as Tsar. Spring 1901. Russia is already in a bit of trouble. Austria got Italy to vacate Venice, and Austria also bounced Russia in Galicia, while Turkey entered Armenia, so it appears that Russia is at a disadvantage relative to its southern neighbors already. Fortunately for Russia, in fall 1901 it becomes clear that Austria is actually somewhat friendly toward Russia, and Austria supports Russia into Romania. That's probably going to be pretty important, I'd imagine. After all, Turkey is now in both Armenia and the Black Sea, and Russia had to bounce Turkey out of Sevastopol to protect it. In the west, Germany has bounced Russia out of Sweden, and England convoys to Norway. So basically, it seems as if everyone hates Russia except Austria. In the build phase, Russia decides to defend the north over building a unit to fight Turkey. That seems a bit risky to me, but I do get it. My predecessor is relying on Austria here to keep him in the game in the south. In spring 1902, England ignores the fact that France built a fleet in Brest, and he continues to commit to a war against Russia. Sounds like a good decision. I'm sure that will work out well. Meanwhile, France enters the English Channel, undoubtedly with nothing but good intentions. In the east, Russia barely continues to fend off Turkey, while Austria mobilizes the entire Austrian military to go and fight Turkey, and Italy heads west to single-handedly take on the French. Fall 1902, Turkey busts through the Russian defense, taking Romania and reducing Russia to his home centers. Austria, for some reason, sneaks into the Ionian Sea instead of moving toward Turkey. To compound Russia's bad luck, Germany moves into Silesia, and Warsaw is vacant at the time. To everyone's shock, England is now being attacked by France of all people. Who could have ever seen this coming? I am shocked and shook. Italy is still trying to attack France, but it looks a little like the kid trying to attack the school bully who's a foot taller than him, and the bully is holding him back with one hand while laughing. In the build phase, France constructs a fleet in Marseille naturally to continue defending against Italy indefinitely, and Turkey builds an army while Russia is forced to destroy his northern fleet. In spring 1903, the original Russian abdicates his throne and I take power. I discuss working together with Turkey, and I give him the impression that I'm ready to make peace with him and attack Austria, leaving Romania in his hands for the time being. He says that's a relief, and he'd rather work with the reasonable Russia than a demanding Austria. Meanwhile, I reaffirm the existing alliance with Austria, and Austria helps me retake Romania. At the same time, I make a treaty with England that allows me to leave St. Petersburg undefended, and I move that army and the Moscow unit to guarantee the defense of Warsaw. Fortunately for me, Germany hasn't done anything to reinforce his lone unit with any additional armies. Unfortunately for me, Germany doesn't really want to respond to my request that he withdraws his unit, and this actually represents a pattern in German communication through the next few years. He doesn't really answer any of my messages. Although I do try to give Austria the impression that I have some kind of a rapport with Germany so that Austria will not feel as if he can work with Germany against me. In the west, England is trying to fight off what is now clearly a French-German alliance, while Italy continues to ineffectually attack France, rather like a fly continually buzzing in your face. Slightly more worrying than Italy's attacks on France, Turkey retreats forward into Galicia. And I start talking to Turkey again. Fortunately for me, he's still interested in potentially working together. Fall 1903, Austria isn't willing to take any risky anti-Turkish moves, so he doesn't leave himself vulnerable to any stabs. Austria also doesn't seem all that committed to quickly defeating Turkey, and he refuses to send the Ionian Sea fleet east. For some reason. I was already finding it difficult to deal with his stubbornness and lack of real commitment to advancing in our shared war, so in my mind, this solidifies a growing impression of Austria as an inferior ally relative to Turkey. In fact, Austria actually sneaks his fleet into Naples, again, for some reason, instead of using his unit for the fight that we're actually in. Meanwhile, France had apparently persuaded Italy to move back a bit, and now France is pushing into the Mediterranean. In the build, the French Armada expands a little bit more, Austria and I each acquire a new army, and Turkey destroys his Armenia unit. The Austrian build annoys me a little more because I had suggested a fleet to Austria and he simply didn't bother responding, and then simply excused it by saying that if Austria grows as a naval threat early on, quote, "it's not a good thing." Those are his exact words, and this flimsy excuse just further ticks me off because it's obvious that Austria is choosing to be prepared for a potential fight with me rather than be prepared for a fight with Turkey or Italy or France. At this point, I'm pretty sure that I want to stab Austria, although I still have to figure out how. Spring 1904. Turkey and I reposition to stab Austria. Austria continues attacking Italy for reasons that will forever remain unknown. Austria continues the same ineffectual anti-Turkish moves that he had previously been entering, and France continues positioning the French Navy to conquer the Mediterranean. I also make moves aimed at intimidating Germany, but it's just saber-rattling right now. Fall 1904, England loses the last English home center to the French-German alliance, which was clearly inevitable unless France stabbed Germany. Since Germany is remaining silent with me, and more or less silent with Austria, and has essentially ticked off all of his neighbors except France, the reverse seems unlikely. In the south, France takes Tunisia and Austria grabs Venice. At the same time, I stab my now annoying and unhelpful ally by cutting his support for Greece remaining in place, so Turkey succeeds in taking it. Unfortunately, with Austria having basically destroyed the Italian defensive effort, France has suddenly become a major threat in the Mediterranean. In spring 1905, Turkey and I unsuccessfully attempt to continue advancing against Austria, but the Austrian defensive strength is just too great. Turkey and France are moving into a position where they could be at a stalemate in the Mediterranean, and I suspect Turkey will eventually lose ground there. I begin communicating with Austria about the three of us allying to stop the French-German alliance, and mainly the probable French win if we don't stop the French advance in the Mediterranean, but Austria is suspicious and non-committal, and frankly I think he's holding a grudge. Meanwhile, England has surrendered, been replaced, the replacement has surrendered again, and fortunately there is a new replacement. However, the new England is listening to some of the words from France, and France is suggesting that England should assume that Scandinavia is a lost cause and just go for St. Petersburg. I tell England that if St. Petersburg is occupied, it will compromise my ability to fight France and Germany, and if England is the one to occupy St. Petersburg, I'll either personally eliminate him or at least keep him out of the draw. England takes this to heart, I think, although it's funny, I never had any intention of letting such a tiny power participate in the draw in any case. Oh well, more on that later. Fall 1905, Austria remains both uncooperative and very difficult to dislodge from the Austrian homeland, and Austria also helps France finish Italy off. He's just public enemy number one at this point. Fortunately, Germany makes poor orders, so England survives for another year. Germany is also still not responding to my messages, so as soon as England falls, I'm pretty sure I'll be invaded from the north. France has been messaging me to try and turn me on Turkey recently, and I tell him I'll do that if he withdraws from the Med and stabs Germany. So, that's probably going nowhere. Spring 1906, Turkey and I attempt to go around Austria to deal with France without directly attacking Austria. Austria's contribution to the game at this point is sitting in place while suggesting that maybe, if Turkey and I can back off Germany, we'll get Germany to stab France. I point out that Germany is not answering messages, and Austria says we should nevertheless have faith in Germany seeing the light. Meanwhile, due to some more poor German orders, Turkey and I manage to put our units next to the German homeland. With fall 1906, Austria surrenders, and a new Austria takes over. Unfortunately, the new Austria's attitude isn't all that different. Germany finally breaks into Sweden. At the same time, Turkey and France both attack Austria successfully, and France puts a unit next to Smyrna. Fortunately for me and Turkey, this is also the season when the original Germany surrenders, and a replacement takes over who is much more interested in talking with his neighbors that are not just France. During retreats, Turkey tells Austria that he's sorry for the half-stab, and he needs the new center to build a new southern fleet. Then Austria and I furiously exchange messages, which I will now read aloud. From Russia. Austria, you've been generally reluctant to commit any units to fighting France. If you're not helping us, this is what we have to do in order to win the war. We would certainly prefer just to work with you rather than to take your dots, but you haven't been very interested in actually doing anything helpful thus far. I think the absence of any helpful moves, or even particularly constructive suggestions, is a big factor here. We need you to put your forces into the battle with France, not simply hold in place. You've refused to do the obvious thing, taking Tyrolia, but now you have an opportunity to redeem yourself. Retreat to Tuscany, destroy one of your armies that's back here, or we will take you apart. From Austria. I was, and still am, reasonably concerned about the buildup of forces from all nations on my border. As I said, France cannot do anything against a united RAT. My holding in position does nothing to threaten you. I was hoping the previous turn would show your sincerity to the alliance, and was disappointed. I also note that you have neglected to tell me why destroying Army Bohemia would have been insufficient as to enable Turkey to build a fleet. Can you outline a concrete plan as to how you would like to continue working with me? At the moment, it looks an awful lot like you are attempting to eliminate me outright. From Russia. Austria, you seem to have an incorrect perception of the nature of the power relationships between our three countries, so I think it's appropriate for me to flip the script on you a bit. We could snuff you out pretty quickly if we chose to do so at this point. Last season, that was less true, so we snuck up and stabbed you. But now I will speak plainly. I don't think there's any justification at all of a belief on your part that you can throw the game to France. With Germany tentatively on our side against France, we can hold our own against him indefinitely no matter what you do. You could get in the way, but if you did so, it wouldn't be for long. So justify your value to this alliance. Propose how you can make yourself useful, and then we may give you the chance to do so. Your holding means we can't advance forward as you've refused to grant support into Tyrolia, and it means there are several centers that are not coming to any good use. How will you make yourself useful, so as to make us think, gosh, we'd better keep Austria alive? I don't mean to be unkind, but the time for addressing the objections you raised in your message is either in the past or in the future. For right now, we will be asking the questions, making the demands, and assessing your actions and answers. Sincerely, Russia. At the close of the retreat phase, Austria actually does retreat to Tuscany, but the intense messaging nevertheless continues into the builds. At some point in all this, Austria surrenders. Fortunately, he's replaced quickly. However, while the new Austria pledges to work with us against France in exchange for Turkey and I withdrawing from his borders, the new Austria also destroys the fleet in Tuscany. If I had any doubts about finishing Austria off, this pretty well extinguished them. Spring 1907, Turkey and I move to finish Austria off. France attacks Austria further too. The replacement Austria surrenders. At the same time, Germany begins playing ball with me because the leverage of Russian and Turkish units outside of Berlin, coupled with the fact that France is becoming ridiculously powerful, proves to be quite an effective inducement. He and England become locked in mutual combat with France, and France continues trying to get me to stab Turkey to no avail. At this point, I have isolated him. Fall 1907, the Anglo-German coalition takes Belgium from France, making up for losing Edinburgh in the spring. I take Vienna and move through Constantinople into the Aegean Sea. In the build phase, I build a northern fleet and bank my other available build to use later. I urge Turkey to build a fleet, but he's evasive and ultimately builds an army which he says will ensure he doesn't get stabbed by me while we're fighting France. That unit's obviously a concern for me, so I decide in my own mind that I'll have to do something about Turkey soon. However, in spring, France proposes a 5-power draw. England accepts because it's the best he can hope for, and he asks Germany and me to accept it too. I tell Turkey that I may need him to shoot it down so I can appear to be on the side of including England, and I believe I told Germany something similar to that. I accept it, but then I'm horrified to see Turkey and Germany both accept it shortly after. So the game just ends. After all that effort, all that scheming, all the manipulation, all the work I was putting in to defeat France. Just a few more years and I would have probably become the strongest power on the map, and France might very well have been gone. Then maybe I could have pursued my own solo run. Or Turkey might have stabbed me. But this game was a little frustrating for me with the way it ended. I suppose that will teach me not to play games with the draws. In my effort to play the politics of the game successfully, I ended up giving France the draw he wanted, allowing him to go out on top. I was mainly surprised that Turkey and Germany were both okay with it. I expected them to reject the draw in their own interests, because a 5-power draw is a bad result on a site like Play Diplomacy, where the games are scored based on the size of the draw you achieve. Oh well, I guess France was more persuasive than I was. Or England was more persuasive. It's actually still a little bit hard for me to understand why Turkey in particular accepted the draw. Oh well. I hope you've enjoyed this after-action report. If so, I hope that will give you reason to like and subscribe to my channel, and check out other videos. Feel free to make suggestions in the comments for other things you'd like to see. And until next time, FloridaMan out.